The first time my mother called me a thief, I was 19 years old and had $43 in my checking account. The second time, I was 47, standing beneath a crystal chandelier while 180 guests watched her raise a champagne glass in my direction. "Some children stay when a family needs them," she said, resting her free hand on my younger sister's shoulder. "Others disappear with whatever they can carry." A murmur moved through the ballroom. My father stared into his drink. My sister, Beth, looked as if she might be sick. Behind my mother, a slideshow displayed photographs from 50 years of marriage. Christmas mornings, beach trips, graduations, birthdays. I appeared in only 4 of them. My mother smiled because she thought the evening belonged to her. She thought I had come home to sign one harmless piece of paper and accept whatever humiliation she considered the price of admission. What she did not know was that the resort company waiting to buy our family orchard had already received a call from my attorney. What she did not know was that the original deed was locked in a case beneath my chair. And what she could not possibly have known was that my grandmother, dead for 8 months, was about to speak. I set my water glass on the table and stood. My knees were steady, though I could feel every heartbeat in the tips of my fingers. "You're right about one thing, Mom," I said. "Tonight is the right time to tell the family what happened to Grandma's money." Her smile did not vanish all at once. It tightened at the corners, the way a ribbon tightens before it snaps. "This is neither the time nor the place, Mara. You made it the place when you called me a thief." At the edge of the dance floor, a gray-haired attorney named Helen Ward closed the ballroom doors. The click of the latch was soft, but my father heard it. He looked up sharply. Beth turned toward Helen, then toward me. My mother followed their eyes and saw the old blue ledger in Helen's hands. For the first time that night, Elaine Bennett looked afraid. To understand why, you have to know that the worst thing my parents ever did to me began as something everyone else called a gift. When I was 8, my grandfather died in late September, 3 weeks before the apple harvest at Bennett Orchard. The farm sat outside Hendersonville, North Carolina, where the Blue Ridge Mountains softened into long green folds and every road seemed to end at a church, a creek, or a roadside stand selling cider. My grandmother June had lived on that land since she was a bride. She knew which trees bloomed early, which rows held water after a storm, and which customers would drive 20 miles for a jar of her apple butter. After Grandpa's funeral, my mother announced that Grandma should not be alone on weekends. "Mara is the calm one," she told my father over dinner. "She likes it out there." I did like it. Grandma June let me shape biscuit dough without correcting every crooked edge. She kept colored pencils in a coffee tin and never told me I was wasting paper. At night, we sat at the kitchen table while an old radio played bluegrass, softly enough that the refrigerator sounded loud. She told stories about women in our family who had survived bad harvests, lost husbands, flooded roads, and years when the bank owned more of the farm than they did. The first few weekends felt like a private adventure. My parents dropped me off on Friday with pajamas in a grocery bag and picked me up Sunday after lunch. Beth, who was 5, cried because she wanted to stay too. Mom knelt in the driveway and promised her they would do something special while I helped Grandma. They did. That Saturday, they went to the state fair. Beth came to school on Monday wearing a pink cowboy hat and carrying a stuffed bear nearly as tall as she was. She talked about the Ferris wheel, the caramel apples, and the photograph a stranger had taken of the 3 of them in front of the fountain. "We'll all go next year," Dad said when he saw my face. We did not. The next year, Grandpa's death was no longer recent, but the weekend arrangement continued. My parents said Grandma depended on me. While I weeded the herb garden, helped label jam jars, and read large print mysteries aloud, they took Beth to football games, fall festivals, and a mountain cabin with 2 other families from church. I learned about the cabin from a photograph tucked beneath the visor in Dad's truck. Everyone wore matching red flannel shirts. Beth sat on his shoulders. My mother's arms circled both of them. There was no empty space where I should have been. They had composed the picture without me. When I asked why I had not been invited, Mom sighed as though I had failed a test. "Mara, your grandmother needs companionship. Beth is too young to be useful, and you're so mature. I thought you were proud of that." At 9, I did not have the words to explain that being useful was not the same as being loved. I apologized. By the time I was 11, my weekends at the orchard had expanded into school breaks and much of the summer. My mother found a reason every time. Grandma's knees hurt. Grandma had too many orders. Grandma might fall. Grandma needed help with the books. Meanwhile, Beth took dance lessons in Asheville, joined a youth swim team, and traveled with our parents to competitions. She had severe asthma when she was little, and Mom invoked it whenever anyone questioned the difference between us. "We nearly lost Beth twice," she would say, lowering her voice. "Mara has always been strong." Strength became the family's permission slip. Because I did not wheeze, I could be left behind. Because I did well in school, no one needed to attend my conferences. Because I knew how to make my own lunch, Mom stopped asking whether I had eaten. Every competence I developed was entered into evidence that I required less care. Grandma noticed before I did. One Friday evening, when I was 12, she opened the grocery bag my mother had packed and found 2 shirts, 1 pair of shorts, underwear, and no socks for a 10-day stay. "Did your mama forget half your suitcase?" she asked. "She said I already have things here." Grandma looked toward the driveway, but my parents' car was already disappearing past the trees. The next morning, she took me into town. We bought socks, a blue sundress, a toothbrush, and a canvas suitcase with brass corners. At the register, she let me choose a small silver bird charm from a rotating display. "A person ought to have belongings that were chosen with her in mind," she said. I wore that bird on a chain until I was 26. I still keep it in my jewelry box. Grandma never spoke badly about my parents then. She asked careful questions instead. Did Beth ever visit the farm? Did Mom call during the week? Did Dad know I had won the county essay contest? When I answered, her mouth would flatten, and she would write something in a blue cloth-bound ledger she kept in the bottom drawer of the china cabinet. I assumed it contained orchard expenses. In a way, it did. The year I turned 13, my parents took Beth to Orlando over my birthday. They told me the trip was for her dance team, though the competition lasted 1 afternoon and they stayed 8 days. Mom promised we would celebrate when they came home. Grandma baked me a spice cake, invited 2 girls from school, and hung paper lanterns from the porch. It was the happiest birthday of my childhood until Beth called that evening. Beth called and said she wished I had agreed to come. When I told her no one had asked me, Mom took the phone. She insisted we had discussed the trip at dinner because she had once asked whether Grandma was busy in October. No one had mentioned Florida. "You made a choice," she said. "Learn to live with it." She hung up before I could answer. Grandma saw my face when I returned to the porch. She did not ask me to defend my mother, and she did not tell me I had misunderstood. She sat beside me on the top step until the candles burned low. "Sometimes," she said, "people change the question after you answer so they can pretend you chose the thing they wanted." That was the first time an adult confirmed that what I remembered was real. After that, I started paying attention. Mom told relatives I preferred the orchard to family trips. She told teachers I was independent and private. She told Beth that I found dance competitions boring. To me, she said Beth felt insecure around me because school came easily to me. She built a different explanation for each listener, but every version produced the same result. Beth remained at the center, and I stayed conveniently out of frame. My father rarely initiated the lies, he simply stood beside them. If I confronted him privately, he said, "You know how she gets," or "Let's keep the peace." After missing my awards night, he left $20 on my desk. We moved it silently between his coffee mug and my room until I used it to buy Grandma a radio antenna. At 14, I began helping with the orchard accounts. Grandma had arthritis in her fingers and distrusted computers, so I entered receipts into a beige desktop machine in the farm office. The business was modest but healthy. The orchard sold apples, cider, preserves, and baked goods. On October weekends, families came for hayrides and photographs. My parents managed the public side of the operation. Mom handled marketing and special events. Dad supervised maintenance and suppliers. Grandma owned 51% of Bennett Orchard, LLC, while my parents owned the rest together. Majority ownership means the last word, Grandma explained. But the last word should be used sparingly, otherwise people stop offering honest ones. She taught me to reconcile a bank statement, question duplicate invoices, and never sign a document I had not read. Those lessons would eventually save the orchard, though none of us knew it yet. One rainy Tuesday, I found a folder labeled Family Development in the accounts cabinet. Inside were reimbursement forms my mother had submitted to Grandma over 5 years. Some were ordinary: dance tuition for Beth, asthma medication, school uniforms. Others carried my name: Mara. Summer enrichment camp, $1,850. Mara. Regional history trip, $740. Mara. Family travel and cultural education, $2,300. I had never attended summer camp. My only regional history trip was a class visit to a courthouse that cost $12. During the dates listed under family travel, I had been at the orchard packing peaches and reading to Grandma. I added the amounts twice. The total was $9,460. When I showed Grandma, she removed her glasses and closed her eyes. She looked tired rather than surprised. "I gave your mother money because she said she couldn't afford to include you," she said. "Include me where?" "The beach, Florida, Washington. Your father's family reunion in Kentucky. She told me you had gone on every one." For a few seconds, the hum of the old computer seemed to fill the whole room. "Why didn't you ask me?" "Because I was foolish." Her voice broke on the last word. "Because I thought asking would make it seem like I did not trust your mother. And because you always arrived here smiling, even when your bag had no socks." She opened the bottom drawer of the china cabinet and placed the blue ledger on the desk. The early pages listed crop yields, equipment repairs, and market sales. Then the entries changed. Grandma had begun recording the dates I stayed with her, the trips my family took, the calls they did not return, and every payment Mom requested in my name. Beside the reimbursement for the Orlando trip, Grandma had written, "Mara was here on her 13th birthday. Elaine said Mara chose not to go. Mara says she was never invited." The sight of my life reduced to neat blue lines should have made me feel small. Instead, it made me feel solid. The ledger was proof that the pattern existed outside my memory. "Are we going to tell them?" I asked. "Yes," Grandma said. "But first, we are going to make copies." That was Grandma June. She believed in mercy, but she trusted documentation. We copied every form at the library in town. She put one set in a safe deposit box and mailed another to Helen Ward, the attorney who had handled Grandpa's estate. Then Grandma invited my parents to the farm for Sunday supper. They arrived with Beth 2 hours late. Mom carried a bakery pie and acted offended that Grandma had already served dessert. Beth, then 11, ran upstairs to watch television. Dad stayed near the kitchen door. Grandma placed the reimbursement forms on the table. "Elaine, why did you charge the orchard for trips Mara did not take?" Mom did not glance at the papers. She looked at me. "You went through private business records?" "I asked Mara to help with the books," Grandma said. "She's 14, and she found what 3 adults missed." Dad pulled out a chair but did not sit. "Maybe these were estimates. We move money around during the season." $9,460 of estimates?" Grandma asked. Mom folded her arms. "You always said the money was for the girls. We spent it on the family. You used Mara's name, because you question every dime I spend on Beth. I question it when you lie." The word changed the air. My mother stood so abruptly her chair scraped the floor. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" she said to me. "To turn Grandma against us?" I had rehearsed explanations all afternoon, but under her gaze they scattered. "I only entered the receipts. You snooped. You twisted things. You've always resented your sister." Grandma struck the table with her palm. "Enough." I had never heard her raise her voice. Beth appeared halfway down the stairs. Grandma pointed to the forms. "You will repay the orchard. You will never request money in either girl's name without receipts, and from now on, Mara will decide whether she stays here. You will not use me as the reason you leave her behind." Mom's face went strangely still. "Fine," she said. "If Mara wants to be treated like an adult, she can make adult choices." For the next 3 months, my parents stopped taking me to Grandma's at all. That punishment hurt more than being excluded from a vacation. The orchard had become the one place where I did not have to argue for my own memories. Mom knew it. She did not need to shout or take my phone. She simply cut the road between Grandma and me. Grandma called every Wednesday at 7. Mom stood in the kitchen during those calls, wiping counters that were already clean. If we spoke longer than 10 minutes, she tapped her watch. At Christmas, my parents sent Grandma a gift basket but said the mountain roads were too icy to visit. They were not. I checked the weather report at school. On Christmas morning, Beth and I wore matching green pajamas. Mom photographed her in front of the tree, then asked me to take pictures of the three of them. When I suggested using the timer so I could join, she said the tripod was in the attic and everyone was hungry. We'll take one later. We never did. That afternoon, a neighbor brought over a package from Grandma. Inside was the canvas suitcase with brass corners. It held warm clothes, 2 books, a bus schedule, $40, and a note. The door is never closed from my side. I read that sentence until I knew the shape of every letter. In March, I used Grandma's bus schedule and walked the final 4 miles to the orchard with the canvas suitcase. Grandma called Dad immediately, but when he arrived, she told him, "She is not a package you can withhold. If you want to punish her, do not use another human being." He let me stay until Sunday, yet he never challenged Mom directly. That became his method, secret kindness without public protection. The weekend visits resumed. The trips did not. Mom became more careful with money, but she became less careful with her contempt. She stopped saying I was mature and started calling me secretive. If I closed my bedroom door, I was plotting. If Grandma phoned, I was reporting on the family. If Beth and I argued over a sweater or the bathroom, Mom saw proof that I was jealous. Beth absorbed the atmosphere without understanding it. Sometimes she repeated Mom's phrases. Other times she crawled into my bed after midnight and asked why I did not like them anymore. "I do like you," I would say. "Then why don't you come with us?" "I'm not invited. Mom says you always say no." We were 2 children standing on opposite sides of a locked door, each told the other one held the key. When I was 16, Beth qualified for a national dance workshop in New York. Grandma paid from an education fund established for both of us, and Mom promised all 4 of us would go. 2 days before departure, she used one low chemistry test, an 82 against a 93 average, to cancel my ticket. Beth slipped a Statue of Liberty postcard beneath my door. "I wish you were coming. I don't care what Mom says." I spent the week with Grandma. On the final day, she took me to Helen Ward's office. Helen showed us the education trust statements, and the numbers did not match the forms Mom had given Grandma. The education account held just over $38,000. It had been created when I was born and later amended to include Beth. According to the latest statements, more than $21,000 remained. According to forms my mother had shown Grandma, less than $9,000 remained. Helen laid the records side by side. "Someone has been requesting distributions from the trust while presenting different numbers to June," she said. The withdrawals paid for dance tuition, travel, costumes, hotel rooms, and 1 credit card balance. Every request bore Dad's signature as parent representative. 2 also carried what looked like Grandma's signature. Grandma touched one of them. I did not sign this. For the first time, the problem was bigger than favoritism. Someone had forged the signature of a 69-year-old widow to take money from a fund created for her grandchildren. Grandma froze further withdrawals. She separated my share into a protected account that neither parent could access and required receipts for Beth's expenses. She also ordered a full audit of Bennett Orchard. Mom blamed me before the auditor made his first phone call. "You humiliated your father," she said the night we returned. "Do you understand how serious these accusations are?" Grandma's signature was forged. "Your father signs paperwork all day. He made a mistake." "Twice?" She stepped closer. "You think because June lets you play accountant that you understand adult life. You don't. Families move money where it is needed. Beth had an opportunity. You had scholarships. I haven't applied to college yet. Everyone knows you'll get one." Again, my competence had become something they could spend. Dad entered the hall near the end of the argument. I asked him directly whether he had signed Grandma's name. He looked at Mom. She answered for him. "This conversation is over." The audit found nearly $27,000 in improper reimbursements and trust withdrawals over 8 years. Some money had benefited Beth. Some had covered household expenses after Dad's hours at the insurance office were cut. Several thousand had paid Mom's personal credit card. Grandma could have filed a police report. Instead, she required my parents to sign a repayment agreement secured by their 49% interest in the orchard. "Why are you protecting them?" I asked her. "I am protecting Beth and the business," she said. "But mercy without a record becomes permission. That is why the agreement exists." The agreement gave Grandma the right to claim my parents' ownership shares if they missed payments for more than 90 days. Helen kept the original. A copy went into the safe deposit box with the blue ledger. For a year, the payments arrived on time. Then came the weekend that broke whatever remained of my family. I was 17 and due to graduate on a Saturday in June. I had been accepted at the University of North Carolina with enough scholarship aid to cover tuition and a campus job to help with living expenses. Grandma planned to attend the ceremony. My parents said they were proud, though Mom spent more time discussing Beth's New York audition, scheduled for the following Monday. On Wednesday, Grandma slipped in the packing shed and fractured her hip. She managed to pull the brass service bell from the sorting table and ring until a seasonal worker found her. I was in calculus class when the school office called. By the time I reached the hospital, she had been admitted for surgery. Mom and Dad arrived an hour later. Beth came in wearing a dance warm-up jacket, her hair pulled into a tight bun. She cried when she saw Grandma. For one hopeful minute, I thought the emergency might draw us together. Then the surgeon said Grandma would need someone with her for several days after the operation. Mom looked at me. "Your classes are finished?" she said. "My graduation is Saturday. The ceremony is optional. So is New York." Beth flinched. Dad glanced toward the door. Mom lowered her voice. "Do not punish your sister for Grandma's accident." "I'm not. I'm asking one of you to stay. This audition could change Beth's life. Graduation matters to me. You already have your scholarship. Walking across a stage changes nothing." Grandma, groggy from pain medication, opened her eyes. "Mara walks," she whispered. Mom pretended not to hear. Every proposed solution circled back to me, surrendering the thing I cared about. Finally, Beth spoke. "I can miss the audition." Mom turned on her. "Absolutely not. Grandma is hurt. And Mara is here." The words landed with such finality that no one spoke for several seconds. On the drive home, Dad handed me a graduation card containing $200. I placed it in the cup holder. When he accused me of turning everything into a statement, I said, "You turned my whole life into one. I'm just finally reading it." My parents took Beth to New York on Friday. Grandma's surgery was delayed because of a heart rhythm problem. I spent graduation in a vinyl chair beside her bed, wearing the white blouse meant for beneath my gown. My guidance counselor called from the ceremony so I could hear my name. A few classmates cheered while I pressed my forehead to Grandma's hand. At noon, a nurse brought in a cupcake with blue icing. Grandma woke long enough to say, "You still walked, just not where they could see you." Her operation took place that evening. Complications kept her in the hospital for 9 days. My parents returned from New York after 6. Beth had been accepted into the summer program. Mom entered Grandma's room carrying flowers and talking about the audition until she noticed the blue ledger on my lap. Grandma had asked me to bring it from the farm. "What are you doing with that?" Mom asked. "Updating the payment record." My parents had missed 4 installments on the repayment agreement. Under its terms, their orchard shares could now revert to Grandma. Dad shut the hospital door. "June, we've had a difficult year. You know that." Grandma's voice was weak but clear. "You found money for New York." "That was for Beth's future," Mom said. "So was the money you took from Mara." Mom looked at me as if I had spoken. "This is your doing." "No," Grandma said. "This is your accounting." She instructed Helen to enforce the agreement. Within a month, my parents' 49% interest transferred to Grandma. She now owned all of Bennett Orchard. They did not lose their jobs or their home. Grandma allowed them to continue managing the business and living in the farmhouse under a formal employment contract. She even offered them a path to earn back a minority share through 10 years of honest work. What they lost was control. My mother could not forgive me for witnessing it. While Grandma recovered, Mom told our church that I had manipulated a vulnerable widow, taken $20,000, and used it for college. No one asked how a 17-year-old had engineered a legal transfer signed a year earlier. They saw Mom cry and decided tears were evidence. 2 weeks before I left for college, my parents invited both sides of the family to a barbecue at the farmhouse. I thought they wanted reconciliation. Grandma, still using a walker, believed the same. After lunch, Mom stood beneath the oak tree and asked everyone to listen. Then she accused me of stealing from my grandmother. "We have tried to handle this privately," she said, holding Dad's hand. "But Mara is leaving for college with money that does not belong to her, and June is too confused to understand what she signed." My aunt stared at me. An uncle asked whether the police had been called. Beth began crying. Grandma struggled to rise from her chair. "That is a lie," she said. Mom continued as though she had not spoken. "We love our daughter, but love does not mean protecting her from consequences." I waited for Dad to stop her. He had seen the audit. He had signed the repayment agreement. He knew every word was false. He put his arm around my mother. That was the moment I left my family. Not when I boarded the bus for college, not when I changed my phone number, but beneath that oak tree, while my father chose a lie because correcting it would embarrass him. Grandma reached me first. She pressed the brass service bell from the packing shed into my hands. "When people refuse to hear you," she said, loud enough for everyone, "make a sound they cannot ignore." Mom tried to take the bell. Grandma pulled it back. I did not defend myself that day. It is easy to imagine the perfect speech years later, but at 17 I was exhausted. I had spent a decade explaining the obvious to people committed to misunderstanding it. I packed the canvas suitcase, left for Chapel Hill, and stopped trying to earn a place in photographs taken by people who preferred me outside the frame. For the first semester, I lived on scholarship money, cafeteria meals, and 6 hours of sleep. I worked mornings at the campus library and evenings at a retirement community. The residents liked that I did not rush them. One woman named Miss Pearl needed 20 minutes to button a cardigan, and the aides often finished it for her. I learned to place the sweater in her lap and wait. The smile she gave me when she fastened the last button decided my career. I became an occupational therapist specializing in older adults. After graduation, I moved to Raleigh, joined a rehabilitation clinic, and built a life that no one in Hendersonville had predicted. It was not glamorous. I drove a used Honda, rented a small apartment, and spent years repaying living expenses that my scholarship had not covered. But the work was mine, the keys were mine, and every room I entered had space for me. Grandma and I remained close. At first, we spoke from payphones and exchanged letters through Helen's office because Mom monitored calls to the farm. Later, Grandma bought a cell phone and hid the charger inside a flour tin. She visited Raleigh twice a year. I returned to Hendersonville only when my parents were away. The arrangement sounds melodramatic now, but at the time it was simply practical. Mom had told relatives that Grandma was mentally failing, and any open contact between us became proof that I was controlling her. Helen documented every legal decision. 2 doctors evaluated Grandma's capacity. An independent accountant reviewed the orchard books annually. Grandma accepted those intrusions because, as she said, truth that cannot survive inspection is not much use. My parents continued managing the orchard under contract. Dad was good with equipment and suppliers. Mom knew how to turn a harvest weekend into an event. Under external oversight, the business grew. They repaid some of what they owed and regained a 10% non-voting interest after 12 years. Grandma retained 90%. To the public, my parents behaved as owners. Their photographs appeared in magazines, and Mom hosted charity dinners in the renovated barn. Beth held her wedding there. I did not attend, although she mailed a private note saying she wanted the choice to be mine. Part of me still blamed her for occupying the place I had been denied. At 38, I left the clinic and opened a respite center for families caring for aging parents. I called it Open Door House. We offered therapy, support groups, and weekend relief for people who loved someone deeply but were drowning in the work of keeping them safe. I designed it around everything my family had misunderstood. No child, spouse, or sibling should become invisible in the name of care. Asking for help was not abandonment. Being capable did not erase need. Grandma invested a small amount, properly documented and approved by Helen. I repaid it in 4 years. She kept the final check framed on her desk, which embarrassed me and delighted her. Beth and I exchanged birthday cards, but little else. I knew she had divorced after 5 years and returned to Hendersonville with a daughter, Sophie. I knew she handled events at the orchard and that Sophie danced, though not competitively. Beth probably knew I had built Open Door House. Our lives ran parallel, close enough to see, too far apart to touch. The first crack in that distance came when Grandma turned 90. Beth called because Grandma had fallen and seemed confused, while Mom refused to seek medical care. I drove to Hendersonville and arranged an ambulance. The cause was a treatable infection, and Grandma recovered after 2 nights in the hospital. There I met Beth's 12-year-old daughter, Sophie, who recognized me from the hospital photograph Grandma called my graduation picture. Beth heard the explanation and looked at me differently, though neither of us was ready to discuss it. Over the next 6 years, Grandma divided her time between the farm and a small apartment near me. She wanted independence, so we built a schedule with home health support, visits from Beth, and regular financial review. Mom complained that I had taken over. In reality, Grandma signed every care plan and rejected half my suggestions. She also began recording what she called her farm history. Beth helped her use a small digital recorder. Grandma described the first cider press, the storm that removed the north barn roof, the migrant families who returned every harvest, and Grandpa proposing beside a row of pear trees. She documented business decisions and the history of the ownership agreement. Some recordings were for the local historical society. Others were meant for us. Paper proves what happened, she told me. A voice proves a person understood it. 3 years before her death, Grandma transferred her 90% interest in Bennett Orchard into the June Bennett Land Trust. The trust protected the orchard from development and named me successor trustee. Beth and I would each receive 45% beneficial interest after Grandma died, while my parents retained their 10% non-voting share. Major decisions required my approval as trustee, and no sale of the underlying land was permitted unless maintaining the orchard became financially impossible. I argued that Beth should be trustee with me. She lived nearby and knew the event business. Grandma refused. Beth still confuses keeping peace with giving Elaine what she wants, she said. You learned the difference. She may think I'm taking control. Then show her the documents while I am alive. We did. Beth met with Helen privately, asked questions, and signed an acknowledgement that she understood the plan. She seemed surprised, but not angry. Mom told me Grandma had already left you everything, she said afterward. She didn't. I can see that. It was the first time we had stood together without Mom interpreting one of us to the other. I wanted to ask Beth about childhood, but 25 years of silence made every opening feel dangerous. We discussed insurance, staffing, and roof repairs instead. It was not closeness, but it was honest. Grandma died in her sleep 8 months before my parents' anniversary. She was 96. I found her in the apartment on a January morning with one hand resting on an open mystery novel and her glasses folded on the table. The doctor said her heart had simply stopped. I had spent years preparing other families for death. None of it prepared me to enter a world where Grandma June was no longer living. Her funeral was held at the orchard. Mom attempted to organize a large public service, but Grandma's written instructions specified a small burial followed by pie and coffee in the packing house. 27 people attended. Beth read a poem. Dad spoke about learning to graft apple trees. Mom described herself as the daughter who had sacrificed her life to preserve the family farm. I said nothing. I placed the brass service bell beside Grandma's photograph and took it home afterward. The trust became effective the following week. Helen met with Beth and me. The orchard was profitable but carried more debt than expected. My parents had authorized renovations to the event barn, a commercial kitchen, and 6 luxury guest cottages. Some projects had been approved by Grandma before her health declined. Others had not. The operating company owes $480,000, Helen said. The orchard can service the debt if revenue holds, but there is another problem. She showed us a letter of intent from Laurel Ridge Resorts. The company proposed buying all 112 acres for $4.8 million. The orchard would become a gated mountain retreat with villas, a spa, and a decorative row of apple trees near the entrance. The letter carried my father's signature as managing member and Beth's electronic initials as events director. It did not mention the land trust. Beth went pale. I never approved a sale. Your initials appear on 2 board resolutions, Helen said. Mom asks me to initial event contracts all the time. I don't remember these. The resolutions claimed the orchard faced immediate insolvency and authorized my parents to negotiate with buyers. They also described my 10% ownership as if it controlled the company and omitted the trust's 90% interest. They can't sell land they don't own, I said. No, Helen replied. But they can create a very expensive mess while trying. Beth covered her mouth. Sophie's college account is tied to the business. Mom said the cottages would increase its value. There it was again. A child's future used to justify an adult's secrecy. We could have confronted our parents immediately. Helen advised us first to determine how far negotiations had progressed. Beth returned to work and copied the relevant files. I commissioned an independent audit and contacted Laurel Ridge through counsel. We learned that my parents had accepted a $200,000 deposit, most of which had already been used to cover construction bills and personal expenses. The closing was scheduled for the Monday after their 50th anniversary celebration. The sale packet included an affidavit stating that no other party held an ownership interest in the property. My father had signed it before a notary. This is fraud, Beth whispered when Helen showed us. Yes, Helen said. Beth walked to the window. For months she had been planning the anniversary party, booking caterers, arranging flowers, and collecting photographs for a family slideshow. The event was supposed to celebrate our parents and announce the resort partnership. Local officials, business owners, church friends, employees, and relatives had been invited. Cancel it, I said. We'll meet them privately tomorrow. Beth did not answer. Then she asked Helen whether the blue ledger still existed. I turned toward her. How do you know about the ledger? Grandma mentioned it in one of the recordings. Beth faced me, tears gathering in her eyes. There are things you need to hear before we talk to Mom. She had spent weeks organizing Grandma's audio files for the Historical Society. Most were exactly what we expected. In one folder labeled, "For My Granddaughters," she found 7 private recordings and scanned copies of letters I had never seen. The first recording was made shortly after my 19th birthday. Grandma described the audit, the repayment agreement, and the barbecue where Mom called me a thief. Her voice was younger and stronger than I remembered it near the end. Mara did not take $1, she said. Elaine and Robert took money from the girls' trust and from the orchard. When I required repayment, they blamed the child who discovered it. Robert knew the accusation was false. He chose not to correct his wife. I had known all of that. Hearing Grandma say it still opened something in my chest. The second file belonged to Beth. Grandma had recorded it only 2 years earlier. Beth, your sister did not reject you, she said. As children, both of you were given messages designed to keep you apart. I have enclosed the letters I was able to save. There may have been others. The scans showed birthday cards and notes in Beth's uneven childhood handwriting. Some had been addressed to the orchard, some to my college dorm. I had never received them. Dear Mara, Mom says you don't want me at your graduation dinner, but I made you a bracelet anyway. Dear Mara, I'm sorry you hate dancing. I wish you could see New York because the library has lions outside. Dear Mara, I asked if you could come to the beach and Dad said not to start trouble. The last letter was written when Beth was 16, after the barbecue. I don't believe you stole from Grandma. I heard Dad tell Mom they should stop saying it before someone checks. Mom said if I took your side, Grandma would cut me off too. I'm sorry I didn't say anything. I'm sorry, I was scared. My mother had intercepted everyone. Where were these? I asked. Grandma found them in a box Mom sent to the farm when she cleaned the attic. The envelopes had never been mailed. Beth wiped her face. I thought you ignored me for 30 years. I thought you believed her. Sometimes I did. It was easier. We sat in Helen's conference room, grieving a relationship neither of us had known we were allowed to have. The third recording contained the detail that changed our plan. Grandma said my mother had visited her 10 days before the barbecue and offered a bargain. If Grandma released my parents from the repayment agreement and restored their ownership, Mom would publicly withdraw the accusation against me. If Grandma refused, Mom would tell the family I had stolen the money and claim Grandma was incompetent. I refused, Grandma said. Not because Mara's reputation did not matter, but because a mother who trades her child's name for property will keep demanding payment. I believed the documents would protect Mara. I did not understand how many people prefer a confident lie to a complicated truth. Beth stopped the recording. Mom sold your name for the farm, she said. She tried. And now she's trying to sell the farm too. The anniversary party would continue, Beth decided. She would not cancel it and give Mom time to rewrite events in private. Laurel Ridge's representatives would attend, as originally planned. Helen would bring the deed, the trust, the audit, and the ledger. Beth would prepare a different final slide for the presentation. I would choose how much of Grandma's recording to play. This feels like revenge, I said. No, Beth replied. Revenge would be lying about her. We're going to let her use her own words first. On the evening of the party, white lights wrapped the orchard's oak trees, and chandeliers hung inside the event barn. The rough beams Grandpa cut by hand were hidden behind ivory fabric. I arrived alone in a navy dress and Grandma's silverbird charm. The brass bell was in my handbag. Helen entered through the catering door with the document case and the blue ledger. Beth met me near the kitchen wearing the bracelet I had sent for her wedding. Mom told me she chose it, she said, then admitted she was terrified. We can still speak to them privately, she shook her head. She will tell everyone you threatened her. She already told Aunt Linda you came back demanding half the sale. I'm entitled to 45% of the trust. She said you want all of it. The old machinery was already moving. Mom had seen my name on the guest list and prepared the audience before I entered the room. My father found me first. He had gone almost entirely gray, and the tuxedo hung loosely on his shoulders. For a moment I saw the man who had taught me to ride a bicycle, holding the seat until I believed I was balanced. Then he looked toward the ballroom to make sure Mom was not watching. I'm glad you came, he said. Are you? Your mother wants this to be a fresh start. She asked me to sign a quitclaim deed, he winced. It's just paperwork. The sale solves a lot of problems. Whose problems? Everyone's. Beth gets security. The employees get severance. Your mother and I can retire. You'll receive something too. From land the trust already owns? His eyes moved back to mine. The color left his face. Who told you about the trust? He asked. It was such a revealing question that I nearly pitied him. He did not ask what trust. He asked who had broken the secrecy he imagined still protected him. Grandma told me when she named me trustee. Dad's mouth opened, then closed. Robert, Mom called from across the room. He stepped away from me automatically. Don't do anything tonight, he whispered. Let us announce the sale, and we'll work it out tomorrow. Closing is Monday. He stared at me. Tomorrow is too late, I said. For the next hour, guests told me how nice it was that I had finally come home. One woman said mothers forgive more than children understand. When I asked what mine had forgiven, she excused herself. The slideshow began after dinner. Beth had assembled hundreds of photographs in chronological order. My parents as newlyweds, Mom pregnant with me, Dad holding 2-year-old Mara on a tractor, Beth's birth. Then the omissions began. There was the state fair, the mountain cabin, Orlando, New York, beach houses, dance competitions, and Christmas mornings I remembered watching from behind the camera. Each photograph looked innocent alone. Together they showed a family repeatedly rehearsing my absence. Mom sat at the front table, smiling through every image. She either did not see the pattern or believed no one else would. The final official slide read Bennett Orchard, a new chapter. A rendering showed sleek stone villas rising where the oldest apple rows stood. The regional director of Laurel Ridge Resorts stepped onto the stage. He praised my parents' stewardship and described a partnership that would bring jobs and tourism. He did not know the legal problem yet. His company's counsel had asked that we wait until documents could be served in person. 2 attorneys stood near the side exit. When he finished, Dad spoke about legacy. Beth thanked the employees. Then Mom took the microphone. She was 72, elegant and upright, with her silver hair swept into a perfect twist. Public attention restored energy to her. She told stories about lean harvests and long nights, about raising 2 daughters while building a business, about sacrifice. Family, she said, is the decision to remain loyal when leaving would be easier? Her eyes found me. The room seemed to lean in the same direction. Many of you know that our older daughter, Mara, chose a different path. We have respected her distance, even when her choices caused this family great pain. Tonight, after nearly 30 years, she has returned. Applause began uncertainly. Mom raised one hand and silenced it. We hope her presence means she is ready to put the past behind her. Some children stay when a family needs them. Others disappear with whatever they can carry. But a mother's door remains open. She rested her hand on Beth's shoulder, posing the two of them for the room. That was when I stood. You're right about one thing, Mom. Tonight is the right time to tell the family what happened to Grandma's money. Her smile tightened. This is neither the time nor the place, Mara. You made it the place when you called me a thief. Helen closed the doors. The lawyers from Laurel Ridge moved toward their director. Beth stepped away from Mom's hand and walked to the projection table. Mom looked at her. What are you doing? Correcting the slideshow. The resort rendering disappeared. In its place appeared the first page of the audit from 1995. The orchard's name was at the top. Below it, a highlighted line showed unauthorized withdrawals, $27,184. Conversations broke out across the ballroom. Mom did not turn toward the screen. Beth, shut that off. Beth's hands shook, but she stayed beside the controls. I walked to the dance floor. I did not take the microphone from Mom. I spoke without it. At 17, I was accused of stealing $20,000 from Grandma June. Many people in this room heard that story. Some repeated it. No one ever showed you a bank statement, a police report, or a canceled check because none existed. Helen placed copies of the audit on the nearest tables. Guests passed them backward. The independent audit found that my parents withdrew money from an education trust created for Beth and me. They also requested orchard reimbursements for trips they claimed I took. During those trips, I was here working with Grandma. Mom lifted the microphone. These were family expenses from 30 years ago. Mara has always distorted ordinary decisions because she resented her sister. Then why did you sign a repayment agreement? Helen asked. She held up the notarized document. My father sat down. Mom's gaze moved through the crowd, searching for the person most likely to restore her version. She chose my Uncle Warren. June was confused after her fall. Mara put papers in front of us while we were trying to care for her. Helen opened the blue ledger. The agreement was signed 10 months before June's fall. I witnessed it. So did your accountant. Uncle Warren stopped looking at my mother. I could have ended the old accusation there. The documents were enough. But the sale still waited behind it. My parents failed to repay the money, I said. Under the agreement, Grandma became sole owner of the orchard. Years later, she placed 90% into a conservation trust. Beth and I are equal beneficiaries. I am the trustee. The Laurel Ridge director turned toward my father. One of his attorneys whispered to him. Mom laughed, but there was no humor in it. You expect everyone to believe your grandmother gave you control of our home? No, I said. I expect the county record and the trust documents to establish it. Helen opened the case beneath my chair and gave the recorded deed to the resort attorneys. They inspected the seal and stepped into the hallway to make a call. Dad rubbed both hands over his face. Mom finally turned on Beth. You knew? Grandma showed me the trust 3 years ago. And you said nothing? I thought you knew. You've spent my whole life telling me Mara was trying to take things from me. Grandma left us equal shares. Your sister controls them, because you taught me to keep the peace instead of telling the truth. Mom's face hardened. After everything I sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me? Beth looked toward the tables where her daughter sat with a friend. You used my asthma, my dancing, and my college as reasons to steal from her, she said. You made me the receipt for everything you did. The room fell silent again. That sentence was not in our plan. It was better than anything we had rehearsed because it belonged entirely to Beth. Mom stepped off the stage. We are not discussing private family matters in front of employees and strangers. You discussed Mara's alleged crime in front of them, Beth said. I was explaining why she abandoned us. She didn't abandon Grandma. She disappeared. She wrote. You hid the letters. Mom froze. Beth changed the slide. Her childhood letters appeared across the screen. Purple ink, Misspelled words, envelopes with no postmarks. Guests leaned forward to read them. Grandma found these in a box from your attic, Beth said. You told me Mara never answered. She never received them. Dad looked up at the screen. Elaine? Mom's composure cracked. They were childish notes. Mara had made it clear she wanted nothing to do with us. I was protecting Beth from rejection. I was 13 when the first one was written, I said. You were protecting the story. You always think you know my motives. Then tell us. I reached into my handbag and removed the brass bell. It looked small in my hand, tarnished along the rim. I placed it on the table beside the microphone and rang it once. The clear metallic sound crossed the ballroom. Employees who had heard that bell at the packing shed decades earlier turned toward it. Beth pressed play. Grandma June's voice filled the room. My name is June Elizabeth Bennett. I am recording this on April 14th, 1997, in the office of Helen Ward. I am of sound mind, and I am speaking because Elaine has threatened to accuse Mara of theft unless I return ownership of Bennett Orchard to Elaine and Robert. Mom lunged toward the projection table. Dad caught her arm. Turn it off! She shouted. No one moved. Grandma's recorded voice continued. Mara did not take $1. Elaine and Robert took money from the girls' education trust and submitted false reimbursements to the orchard. Robert knows this. He signed the repayment agreement. If my granddaughter is blamed, let this recording correct the lie. Dad released Mom's arm as though it had burned him. On the recording, Grandma paused. We could hear the faint ticking of the office clock. Elaine told me a family survives by protecting its name. She is wrong. A family survives when the truth is safer inside it than outside it. The file ended. For several seconds, the ballroom held no sound except the ventilation fans. Mom looked at Dad. Say something. All my childhood had been built around those two words. Say something. Dad had heard them in hospital corridors, at the kitchen table, beneath the oak tree. Every time, he had chosen silence. This time, 180 people were watching the cost of it. He stood slowly. June was telling the truth, he said. Mom stared at him. Robert, we took the money. At first it was for bills, then for Beth's travel. Then we kept moving it around because we thought the next season would cover it. His voice shook. Mara found the records. She didn't steal anything. My mother's face emptied of expression. Dad looked at me. I should have said that 30 years ago. Yes, I said. He seemed to expect more. Perhaps forgiveness. Perhaps recognition that confession was difficult. I gave him only the truth. He had finally managed to speak. One of the Laurel Ridge attorneys returned and handed the director a phone. After a brief conversation, the director approached the stage. In light of undisclosed ownership interests and material misrepresentations, Laurel Ridge is terminating its purchase agreement effective immediately, he said. We will seek return of the deposit and reserve all other rights. Mom turned on him with sudden fury. You cannot humiliate us in our own home. It is not your home to sell, I said. She faced me then. The anger I remembered was still there, but beneath it was something smaller and more frightened. For years, she had controlled people by controlling the version of events they were permitted to hear. The documents, the letters, Beth's testimony, Dad's admission, and Grandma's voice had removed that power one layer at a time. What do you want? She asked. It was the first direct question she had asked me all evening. I want the sale canceled. I want a complete forensic accounting of the construction debt and the deposit. I want the orchard protected according to Grandma's trust. And I want a written correction sent to every family member and church leader who was told I stole from her. Mom gave a bitter smile. There it is. Public humiliation. A private apology cannot correct a public lie. And if I refuse? Helen answered. The trust will remove you and Robert as managers. Any evidence of fraud will be provided to the lender and the appropriate authorities. Dad closed his eyes. Mom looked toward Beth. You would throw your parents out of the house where you grew up? Beth glanced at me. This was the moment Mom expected our new alliance to fracture. No one has said anything about throwing you out, Beth replied. But you cannot keep using the house as permission to hurt people. I explained the proposal Helen and I had prepared. My parents could remain in the farmhouse for 12 months while transitioning to retirement. Dad could consult on orchard operations if the new manager wanted his help. Their 10% interest would remain intact unless a court ruled otherwise. The trust would not pursue criminal charges over the original withdrawals because Grandma had settled them through the ownership transfer. The new financial misrepresentations, however, had to be disclosed and resolved lawfully. It was not mercy without consequence, and it was not punishment without purpose. It was a boundary written so clearly no one could change the question later. Mom listened, then shook her head. You planned all of this. I prepared for it. Same thing. No. Planning would mean I created the problem. Preparing means I stopped pretending you wouldn't. She looked around the ballroom at faces that no longer arranged themselves into an audience of supporters. Some guests were angry. Others were embarrassed by their own participation. Most simply watched. I gave my life to this family, Mom said. Beth's voice softened. You gave us roles. That isn't the same thing. Mom removed the anniversary corsage from her wrist and dropped it onto the table. Then she walked out through the doors Helen had closed. No one followed her. Dad remained beside his chair. After a moment, he picked up the corsage and sat down again. The party ended without music. I assured the worried employees that the orchard would open as usual the next morning. Beth helped pack the uneaten food for a shelter while Helen collected the documents. At midnight, only family remained. Dad found me beneath the oak tree where Mom had accused me 30 years earlier. The white party lights made the branches look silver. I'm sorry, he said. I waited. I was afraid of losing the marriage, the house, the business. Every year I told myself I would fix it when things calmed down. They never calmed down. No. And you lost them anyway, he nodded. There are apologies that open a door, and apologies that merely identify where the door used to be. My father's was the second kind. I believed he regretted his choices. I also understood that regret did not return my graduation, the letters, or 3 decades of family life. I don't know what happens between us, I told him. But it won't happen in secret. No more private sympathy while you support a public lie. I understand. I was not sure he did, but for once I did not explain it twice. The months after the party were less dramatic and more difficult. Public truth does not organize payroll, repair roofs, or untangle a fraudulent deposit. Beth and I hired an experienced orchard manager and opened every account to the forensic auditor. Laurel Ridge recovered most of its deposit from an unused construction reserve. My parents sold a vacation timeshare and refinanced their 10% interest to cover the remainder. Because the company cooperated and repaid the money, the resort chose civil settlement rather than a criminal complaint. Dad sent the written correction I had requested. He named the audit, admitted that I had never stolen from Grandma, and acknowledged his role in repeating the accusation. He mailed it to relatives, church leaders, former employees, and family friends. Mom refused to sign. Instead, she wrote her own letter saying family business had been misinterpreted by outsiders and that grief had caused everyone to behave emotionally. She did not name the money, the forged signature, the hidden letters, or the attempted sale. She ended with a sentence about forgiveness. I did not answer. My parents moved to a townhouse outside Asheville 9 months later. Dad consulted at the orchard for 1 season, then retired. We met for occasional coffee. I did not call it reconciliation. It was evidence that he could finally do a small, honest thing repeatedly. Mom did not speak to me for almost 2 years. She saw Beth and Sophie at holidays, though Beth stopped allowing her to criticize me in their home. Whenever Mom began rewriting the anniversary party, Beth ended the visit. Boundaries did what arguments never had. They made access depend on behavior. Beth and I did not become sisters overnight. We could not recover 30 years by comparing letters over one long weekend. We started with Wednesday phone calls. Then she visited Raleigh and toured Open Door House. I attended Sophie's high school graduation and sat in the front row beside Beth. When the ceremony ended, Sophie handed me her cap and asked me to appear in the family photograph. I nearly stepped aside out of habit. Beth touched my elbow. The picture is waiting for you. So I stayed. The orchard survived. We removed 3 unfinished cottages, restored the damaged hillside, and converted the completed commercial kitchen into a teaching space. Beth expanded weddings and harvest events, while I created a weekend program for caregivers and older adults through Open Door House. Families could walk the orchard, make pies, attend support groups, and rest without treating one person's needs as the responsibility of an invisible child. We named the program June's Table. On the first Saturday, I hung Grandma's brass bell beside the packing house door. We rang it for meals, hay rides, and closing time. Children loved it. They would line up and ask for a turn, each producing a sound slightly different from the last. One autumn afternoon, I found a girl of about 10 sitting alone beneath the oak tree while her family gathered for a photograph. She said her little brother needed both parents because crowds made him anxious. She had been told she was old enough to wait. I knew that sentence. I asked the photographer to pause. Then I found the girl's mother and explained that our staff could sit with her son for 2 minutes if she wanted all of her children in the picture. The mother looked embarrassed, then grateful. She called her daughter over. As the family arranged themselves, the girl stood at the edge. Her mother pulled her gently toward the center. That small movement affected me more than the ballroom, the canceled sale, or 180 people learning my mother had lied. Justice is not always the moment a room discovers the truth. Sometimes it is what you build afterward, so the old harm does not become someone else's inheritance. On the 3rd anniversary of Grandma's death, Beth and I listened to the final recording in the folder marked for my granddaughters. We had delayed because neither of us wanted to reach the end of her voice. Grandma spoke slowly. Mara, being needed made you feel safe, because being loved did not. Those are different things. Beth, being chosen made you afraid the choice could be withdrawn. That is not safety either. I hope you will stop asking which one of you mattered more. The answer was never supposed to be only one. Beth reached for my hand. The recording continued. The orchard is land, and land changes hands. Keep it if it serves people. Let it go if preserving it requires you to become cruel. No property is worth a granddaughter's name. There was a rustle of paper, then the sound of Grandma laughing at herself because she had forgotten how to stop the recorder. The file ended there. That spring, Mom sent me a plain envelope. Inside was no apology, only the original photograph from the state fair when I was 8. The one with Dad, Mom, and Beth in front of the fountain. On the back, Mom had written, "I see the empty space now." I did not mistake recognition for repair. I placed the photograph in the blue ledger and returned both to the safe. A week later, I wrote that if she ever wanted to meet with a family therapist, I would attend one session and listen. I would not meet privately, and I would not pretend the past had been a misunderstanding. She has not accepted. Perhaps she never will. For most of my life, I believed closure would arrive when my mother finally admitted what she had done. It did not. Closure came when her admission stopped being necessary for me to trust my own memory. Every October, at the opening of harvest season, Beth, Sophie, Dad, and I stand beneath the oak tree for a photograph. We use a tripod and a timer. Employees, children, and guests wander in at the last second, so the picture is never elegant. Someone always blinks. Someone is usually holding a pie. No one is asked to step out because another person needs more room. Before the camera flashes, I ring Grandma's bell. The sound crosses the orchard, bright and impossible to ignore.